Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel, The Story Library. I hope you all stay well and healthy. Story name, The Missing Man. Starting a new story today. The small town of Ravenswood was known for its quiet streets and peaceful nights. Nothing unusual ever happened there. Everyone knew each other and every face in town was familiar. But one rainy evening, everything changed. A man walked into town carrying an old leather suitcase. He wore a long black coat and looked exhausted, as if he had traveled for days. No one had ever seen him before. The man stopped in front of a small cafe called Emily's Corner. Inside, the owner, Emily Carter, looked up as the bell above the door rang. "Can I help you?" she asked. The stranger smiled weakly. "I need a place to stay for the night." Emily noticed something strange about him. His clothes were wet, but there wasn't a single drop of rain on his suitcase. "We have a motel down the street," she said. The man nodded. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, he suddenly stopped. "What year is this?" he asked. Emily frowned. "What? The year? What year is it?" "It's 2026, she replied. The man's face turned pale. "That's impossible," he whispered. Before Emily could ask anything else, he hurried away. The next morning, the entire town was shocked. The stranger had disappeared. His room at the motel was empty. His bed had never been slept in. But his suitcase remained. Sheriff Daniel Brooks arrived at the motel and opened the suitcase. Inside, he found old photographs. One picture showed the stranger standing beside a woman and a little boy. The date written on the back of the photograph was October 12, 1986. The sheriff's heart nearly stopped, because the man in the photograph looked exactly the same. Not older, not younger, exactly the same. "Who is this man?" Daniel whispered. Suddenly, the motel owner gasped. "I know him, you do?" asked the sheriff. The owner nodded. "His name is Michael Turner." Daniel stared at him. "But that's impossible." "Why?" The motel owner swallowed hard. "Because Michael Turner disappeared 40 years ago." Silence filled the room. The sheriff looked at the photograph again. The same face, the same clothes, the same eyes. A cold chill ran down his spine. Later that day, Daniel visited the town library. The old librarian searched through dusty newspapers. Finally, she found an article. "Local man missing without a trace." The article was dated May 1986. The missing man in the picture was the stranger, Michael Turner. According to the newspaper, he had been 32 years old when he vanished. But if that was true, why did he still look 32? Where had he been all these years? And most importantly, where had he disappeared again? As Daniel left the library, he noticed something strange. On the last page of the newspaper, someone had written a message in red ink: "Find the old railway station before midnight." The sheriff froze, because the handwriting looked fresh, as if someone had written it only minutes ago. And beneath the message was a name: Michael Turner. Sheriff Daniel Brooks couldn't stop staring at the words written on the newspaper. "Find the old railway station before midnight." And below it was the name, Michael Turner. A cold wind blew through the library window. The librarian looked nervous. "Daniel, that handwriting wasn't there this morning." "You mean someone came in and wrote it?" She slowly nodded. "But I never saw anyone." Daniel carefully folded the newspaper and walked outside. The sky had turned dark. Thick clouds covered the moon, and the entire town seemed unusually quiet. He looked at his watch. 8:30 p.m. Only 3.5 hours until midnight. Back at the sheriff's office, Daniel searched through old records. He found a dusty file labeled Ravenswood Railway Station, closed in 1987. According to the documents, the station had been shut down after a terrible accident. A train had disappeared. Not crashed, not derailed, disappeared. The file said that 23 passengers and 2 crew members had vanished without a trace. The last person seen boarding that train was Michael Turner. Daniel's heart began beating faster. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. It was Emily. "You look terrible," she said. Daniel showed her the file. Emily's eyes widened. A disappearing train? And Michael was on it. Emily sat down. "Then maybe that's where he's been all these years." Daniel shook his head. "Nobody can disappear for 40 years and return without aging." Before Emily could answer, the lights in the office flickered. Then they went out. Darkness filled the room. A few seconds later, the lights came back on. Something was lying on Daniel's desk. A small, silver pocket watch. Neither of them had seen it before. Daniel picked it up. The watch had stopped at exactly 11:58 p.m. Inside the cover was an inscription, "For my beloved son Michael." Emily looked frightened. How did that get here? Daniel didn't answer, because he had just noticed something else. The watch was warm, as if someone had been holding it only moments ago. At 11:15 p.m., Daniel and Emily drove to the old railway station. The station had been abandoned for decades. Broken windows, rusty tracks, weeds growing everywhere. The sign that once read Ravenswood Station was hanging by a single nail. As they entered, the air suddenly became freezing cold. Emily shivered. "I don't like this place." Neither did Daniel. Then they heard it. A whistle, a train whistle, but there were no trains anymore. The sound came again, louder this time. The ground beneath them trembled. Then, in the distance, a light appeared. A bright white light, moving along the old tracks. Emily's eyes widened. "Daniel, do you see that?" He nodded slowly. The light came closer, and closer, until they could finally see it. A train, an old black steam train. Its windows glowed with yellow light. Clouds of steam rose into the night sky, but the tracks ended hundreds of feet away. The train should not have been able to move, yet it kept coming. Finally, it stopped in front of the station. The doors slowly opened. Nobody stepped out. Everything was silent. Then a voice came from inside. "Daniel." He froze. It was a man's voice. "Help us." Emily grabbed his arm. "We need to leave, right now." But Daniel couldn't move. The voice came again. "Please, we're trapped." Suddenly, a figure appeared in one of the windows. A man wearing a black coat. Michael Turner. He looked exactly the same as before. Michael raised his hand and pointed toward the train door. Then, he disappeared. Daniel took a deep breath. "I am going inside." "Are you crazy?" Emily whispered. "If those people are really trapped, I have to know." He stepped onto the train. The moment he entered, everything changed. The station outside vanished. The windows showed only darkness. The air inside smelled old and dusty. The seats were filled with people. Men, women, children, all of them sitting perfectly still. They looked pale. Their eyes were empty. None of them moved. Then one little girl slowly turned her head toward him. "You're late," she said. Daniel's blood turned cold. "What? We've been waiting for 40 years. Suddenly, every passenger looked at him. At the same time, at the end of the carriage stood Michael Turner. He slowly walked forward. "You finally came," he said. "Who are you?" Daniel asked. Michael looked sad. "I have been trying to come home for 40 years. What is this place?" Michael looked around. "This train doesn't belong to our world anymore." A loud bang echoed through the carriage. The doors suddenly slammed shut. The train began moving. Daniel stumbled. "We're moving!" Michael nodded. "And if you don't leave before midnight," he looked directly into Daniel's eyes, "you'll disappear with us forever." At that exact moment, the old pocket watch in Daniel's hand started ticking again. Tick, 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 and the hands moved toward midnight. The old pocket watch kept ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Sheriff Daniel Brooks looked around in panic. The mysterious train was moving through complete darkness. Outside the windows there was nothing. No stars, no trees, no sky. Only endless blackness. "Where are we?" Daniel asked. Michael Turner sighed. "Between two worlds." Daniel stared at him. "That's impossible." "I used to think so too," Michael replied, "until I boarded this train 40 years ago." Suddenly, one of the passengers stood up. An elderly woman. Her face looked pale and tired. "We don't have much time," she said softly. "Who are you people?" Daniel asked. "We are the passengers of train number 7, she answered. "We left Ravenswood Station on the night of October 12, 1986. But we never reached our destination." A young man nearby spoke. "Something happened during the journey. The train entered a strange fog, then everything disappeared." Another passenger added, "We've been trapped here ever since." Daniel looked at Michael. "But why haven't you aged?" Michael smiled sadly. "Because time doesn't exist here." The words sent chills through Daniel's body. The watch ticked again. 11:59 p.m. Only 1 minute until midnight. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The train shook violently. A loud screech echoed through the carriage. Then every passenger looked toward the front of the train, their faces filled with fear. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Michael's expression changed. "It's coming! What's coming?" Before anyone could answer, a terrifying roar echoed through the train. The windows turned dark red. The lights went out. A few seconds later, they came back on. At the far end of the carriage stood a tall figure. It was not human. Its body was covered in shadows, and its glowing eyes burned like fire. Daniel felt his blood freeze. "What is that thing?" Michael whispered. "The collector." "The collector? It keeps us here." The creature slowly moved forward. Every step made the train tremble. The little girl who had spoken earlier began to cry. "It won't let us leave," she whispered. Michael stepped in front of Daniel. "You must go back. I'm not leaving without you. You have to." The collector roared again. The window suddenly showed Ravenswood Station. The old platform appeared outside. Emily was standing there. She was screaming and banging on the train door. "Daniel, get out!" Daniel's heart raced. The train was back at the station, but only for a moment. Michael grabbed his arm. "Listen carefully. This train appears in the real world for only 60 seconds every 40 years. Daniel stared at him. "If you stay after midnight, you'll be trapped here forever. What about all of you?" Michael looked at the passengers. "We've accepted our fate." "No!" Daniel shouted. "There has to be a way." The old woman suddenly stood. "There is." Everyone looked at her. "The train needs a replacement." Silence filled the carriage. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the collector. "Every 40 years, one soul may leave. If another stays behind." The entire train became silent. Daniel couldn't believe what he had heard. Someone had to remain trapped forever. Michael slowly smiled. "Now you understand." "No, I brought you here because I need your help." Daniel's voice trembled. "You want me to take your place?" Michael shook his head. "No." He looked toward the little girl. "She deserves another chance." The little girl looked no older than 8 years old. She had been trapped here for 40 years. Daniel's eyes filled with sadness. Michael knelt beside her. "You should have grown up, had a family, lived a long life." The little girl began to cry. "I don't want to stay here anymore." Michael stood and looked at Daniel. "I've already lived my life. I was 32 when I disappeared, but she was only a child." The watch ticked louder. 11:59, 45 p.m. Only 15 seconds remained. The collector moved closer. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness. Emily was still outside, desperately trying to open the door. Michael took a deep breath. "I know what I must do." Daniel's eyes widened. "No!" Michael smiled peacefully. "Tell my wife and son that I never forgot them." He placed the silver pocket watch in Daniel's hand. Then he gently pushed the little girl toward the door. "Run." The train doors slowly opened. The little girl ran out onto the platform. Daniel grabbed Michael's arm. "Come with us!" Michael shook his head. "My time ended 40 years ago." The collector stopped moving, its glowing eyes fixed on Michael. He stepped forward. "I'll stay." The creature let out a deep, terrible growl. The train began shaking violently. The clock struck midnight. 12:00 a.m. The doors slammed shut. Daniel barely jumped onto the platform before the train started moving again. Inside, Michael stood by the window. He smiled one last time. Then the train disappeared into the darkness. Silence returned to Ravenswood Station. Emily ran to Daniel. "Are you okay?" He couldn't speak. Beside him stood the little girl. For the first time in 40 years she was free. Then something unbelievable happened. The little girl's body began to glow. Slowly, she started aging. 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. Within seconds, she became an old woman. Tears filled her eyes. "We're finally home," she whispered. Then, she looked up at the sky and smiled. In the distance, a train whistle echoed one last time. The cold night air surrounded the old railway station. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stood speechless, staring at the empty tracks where the mysterious train had vanished. Beside him, the old woman, once the little girl trapped on the train, wiped tears from her eyes. Emily gently touched Daniel's shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. But Daniel wasn't sure. As he looked down at the silver pocket watch in his hand, he noticed something strange. The watch had stopped again. This time, the hands pointed to a different time. 3:13 a.m. Why did it stop there, he wondered. The old woman suddenly looked frightened. "No," she whispered. "What is it?" Daniel asked. She slowly turned toward him. "That's the time the train first disappeared." Daniel frowned. "You remember?" She nodded. "I remember everything." The next morning, Daniel took the old woman to the sheriff's office. Her name was Sarah Miller. 40 years ago, she had been only 8 years old when she boarded train number 7 with her parents. She told them everything she remembered. The train entered a thick white fog, Sarah said. Then there was a loud noise, the lights went out, and when they came back on, we were no longer in our world. And the collector? Emily asked. Sarah looked down. It appeared soon after. It told us that no one could leave. Daniel listened carefully. But why did the train disappear in the first place? Sarah hesitated. There was one more passenger on the train. What passenger? I never saw his face. The room became silent. He was wearing a dark hat and carrying a small black box. Daniel and Emily exchanged nervous looks. What happened to him? Daniel asked. Sarah swallowed. He opened the box. A cold chill ran through the room. And then? The fog came. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to the old railway station alone. Something about Sarah's story bothered him. A man with a black box, a mysterious fog, and a train trapped between worlds. As he searched the abandoned station, he noticed a loose wooden board beneath an old bench. He pulled it aside. Underneath was a small metal box. His heart nearly stopped. It was black, exactly as Sarah had described. Carefully he opened it. Inside was an old journal. The first page read, "Property of Professor Edward Langley." Daniel quickly turned the pages. The professor had been a scientist and historian who believed in hidden dimensions. The journal explained that he had discovered an ancient object capable of opening a doorway between worlds. He had brought it aboard train number 7 to test his theory, but something had gone terribly wrong. The final entry read, "The door has opened. Something came through. If anyone finds this journal, never try to open the passage again." Daniel's hands trembled. The last sentence was written in shaky handwriting. "The creature is not the jailer, it is the guard." The guard? Daniel read the line again. Then he understood. The collector had never trapped the passengers. It had been keeping something else inside the darkness. Suddenly, the station became cold, very cold. The pocket watch in Daniel's hand began ticking. Tick, tick, tick. He slowly looked up. A thick white fog was spreading across the tracks, and from inside the fog came a sound. Footsteps, then a voice, a familiar voice. Daniel. It was Michael Turner. A figure slowly emerged from the mist. Michael looked exactly the same. "You came back?" Daniel asked in disbelief. Michael smiled sadly, only for a moment. "What is happening?" Michael looked toward the darkness. "The door is opening again. The collector stopped it before, didn't it?" "Yes." "Then why are you here?" Michael's expression became serious. "Because now you know the truth." A loud roar echoed through the fog. The ground began shaking. Something enormous moved in the darkness beyond the tracks, something much larger than the train. Michael looked frightened. "It has awakened." "What is it?" "The reason the collector exists." Suddenly, 2 burning red eyes appeared deep inside the fog. Daniel stepped backward. The eyes were enormous. Whatever was hiding there was not human. Not even close. "The collector kept this thing trapped for 40 years, Michael said. "And now?" Michael looked at him. "Now it wants to enter our world." The creature in the fog let out a deafening scream. Windows shattered across the station. Daniel covered his ears. "What do we do?" Michael pointed to the black box. "Destroy it." Without the box, the doorway would close forever. Daniel picked up the box. It felt strangely warm. The creature moved closer. Its gigantic shadow appeared inside the fog. "Do it now!" Michael shouted. Daniel threw the box onto the railway tracks and struck it with a heavy iron bar. Nothing happened. The creature roared again. "Again?" Michael cried. Daniel hit the box a second time. A crack appeared. The fog swirled violently. One more strike. The box shattered into pieces. A blinding white light exploded across the station. The scream from the darkness became louder and louder. Then suddenly, silence. The fog disappeared. The red eyes vanished. Everything was gone. Only the empty railway tracks remained. Daniel looked around. "Michael?" No answer. He turned. Michael was fading away. A peaceful smile appeared on his face. "You saved them," he said softly. "And you?" Michael looked toward the sky. "I think it's finally time for me to go home." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. "Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, my friend." A soft breeze passed through the station, and then Michael Turner disappeared forever. The silver pocket watch stopped ticking for the last time. Years later, the people of Ravenswood still tell the story of the missing train and the man who vanished for 40 years. Some nights, when the fog is thick and the moon is hidden, people claim they can hear the distant sound of a train whistle, but no train ever comes. and on the old railway platform, a small memorial stands. It bears a single inscription, in memory of those who were lost between worlds, and the man who found his way home.